Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Analytics Playbook webinar. I'm Dana DiTomaso, founder of Analytics Playbook and president of Kickpoint. And today I am joined by someone whose insights I have been following for years, Lily Ray. Lily is VP of SEO Strategy and Research at AMSIF. And if you've been paying any attention to what's happening in search over the past few years, you've probably seen her takedowns of AI content spam, her research on algorithm updates, and her work on EEAT. So today we're calling this an AI reality check, because while everyone's talking about how AI has revolutionized SEO and it's, the new world order of SEO or AIO or whatever you want to call it these days, geo, Lily's going to tell us what's actually changed versus what's hype. And we'll talk about which core tactics still matter, which new strategies are not actually going to last, and what SEO professionals should actually focus on right now. Now, this is a conversation, not a presentation, so please make sure to ask questions in the chat. I'll ask them as we go. And if you have to drop out early, don't worry. We'll be emailing everyone who registered on LinkedIn a recording of today's session. If you are watching this on YouTube, please make sure to hop over to the Analytics Playbook LinkedIn page and register, or just message me on LinkedIn or elsewhere and I can help you out. So now I'm going to bring in Lily and we can get started. Hey, Lily, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. I really appreciate you taking the time for this. And quite literally, I've been following your stuff for years and years and years. I really enjoy your takedowns of, well, when AI mode first came out, the ridiculousness of like putting glue on pizza and stuff like that. Like it was, yeah, very fun
Yeah,
things you found out. Yeah,
well, likewise.
yeah,
Honored to be here.
of course. Thanks. So let's start off by talking about, the vicious cycle of SEO, which is something you recently talked about. Tactics emerge, get scaled, they get abused. I call this that we marketers, we break our toys. We
Mhm.
abuse the heck out of it, and then we get penalized. So do you think all this AI hype is another vicious cycle, or do you think that AI is here to stay in some aspect of SEO?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think so. Like I presented a few times earlier this year about what I call the vicious cycle of SEO, which you kind of just reiterated. But basically,
Mm-hmm.
when marketers and SEOs jump on, some type of tactic or opportunity or exploit, and then it becomes popularized, like people share it on YouTube, people share it on LinkedIn or X or whatever, and more people start doing it, it becomes really easy for a company like Google to identify the problem and nullify the problem, right? Or penalize the
Mm-hmm.
problem.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we've seen in the SEO space forever. Like something becomes too popular. And even though maybe it started with good intentions and it started as something that maybe is seen as good for users, it becomes like overly overused, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
kind of becomes like something that search engines decide this actually isn't providing a lot of value for our users. So I think there's a lot of tactics that are circulating right now with the rise of AI search that people have been advocating, that actually, if you kind of compare them against like Google and Bing search quality guidelines, they do raise a lot of red flags. Like they are things that do kind of fall into the same buckets of spam policies that Google's had for many years, like doorway pages and thin content and scaled content abuse. So I think, and to that end, I think like a lot of AI search tactics are probably going to be penalized, at least in organic search. What we don't know, and what will be interesting to see, is how the AI companies, like OpenAI and Anthropic and everything, start to incorporate their own anti-spam measures more and more over time, and how they start to like really curate, the training data to reduce spam and misinformation and fake news and everything within the training data. So that's a whole new animal, right? It's different than search engines, but given that LLMs draw from search results so much already, I think, just as a defense mechanism, it's probably best to not get in trouble, even if it's getting in trouble with Google, because, OpenAI uses Google search results, and Google also, Gemini is growing and AI mode is growing. So you don't want to be in trouble with Google's own, search index.
Yeah, I've often said that ChatGPT is basically just Google in a trench coat. And I feel like it's really just, especially with Atlas, because I've been testing Atlas quite a bit to see how it shows up in GA4, for example. And I feel like a lot of these tools, like it's just a fancy coat of paint on top of what we already use for search.
Yep.
And so I don't know why people think that these sorts of tactics, like doorway pages, which have been around forever, and I can't believe they're back again. Like, why do people magically think this is going to work now when they didn't work? Well, they haven't worked for years.
I think honestly, the answer to that question is there's a ton of hype right now, and there's a ton of new people entering the space without context, which
Mm-hmm.
is why I've been advocating this year to like, no, don't stop focusing on SEO. Don't fire your SEO teams. The people that are most equipped to understand the implications of these changes are SEO teams, because they have the context and the history and the experience to say, maybe, I understand that's a tactic that could help with AI search visibility, but I'm concerned about the implications on SEO, and SEO is still driving 40% of our traffic compared to 1% for AI search, right? It's like putting things into perspective a bit. So I think that honestly, there's just a lot of new players. There's a lot of new tools, a lot of new people in the industry that don't have that context. So with the work that I've been doing lately, it's just to like remind everyone of the landscape that we're in, because these, if anything's true with SEO over time, it's that these cycles have just repeated themselves over and over and over, right? Since 1995.
Yep. Yep. And it's, yeah, I mean, talking back in 1995, the old Alta Vista days,
Right.
and it was like there was spam back then too. I remember when I first started in SEO in 2000, 25 years ago now, it was like if you put the keyword in the title tag 3 times, done. And then we had the meta
Right.
keywords tag, and then people abused it. So it's, yeah, we just love breaking our toys all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah, so bad at it. So let's talk about another quality signal, which is EAT, which you've been singing the praises of for a very long time. So do you think that, I mean, obviously people don't talk about EAT as much as they used to because of AI content, but do you still think that EAT is as important as it was before the AI hype started? Or is it possible to fake EAT now with AI, which was, I don't know if you saw this or not, it was a presentation of Brighton SEO. People were shocked that they were talking about like how to fake it until you make it. But
Yeah.
do you think it is possible to fake it until you make it with AI and EAT?
Yeah. That presentation was, I think, a couple talks before mine on the same stage where I
Oh
said the exact
no,
opposite.
I
Yeah.
wasn't there. It was the UK edition, but I did see all
Yep.
the posts about it. Like, oh, that's
That was
awkward.
an
Yep.
interesting day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So listen, yes, the answer is yes. Can you fake it? Can you trick the algorithms? Can you create fake author bios? Everything right now, it's more possible than it ever has been with AI, right? To manipulate like search engines at the very least, let alone your users,
Mm-hmm.
into thinking that this is a real person. This person has real credentials, coming up with fake bios, coming up with fake headshots. Like all of this is possible. So I'm not going to stand here and say like, yeah, you can't fake it. Of course you can. My concern would be, and I think EEAT is just as important as it always has been, because the
Mm-hmm.
fundamentals of what EEAT mean are you instilling trust in your users, right? When your users read the content, can they believe you? And if users are good at anything, it's over time identifying where they're being deceived, right? Even if right now they don't understand, I'm reading AI content that hasn't been fact checked and, isn't based on real evidence over time. And you're starting to see this now. People are like, I don't like this content. I don't feel like I trust it. Right. And we're starting to
Mm-hmm.
hear more and more people with those concerns about AI. It's the same thing that we had with SEO. In the last 10 or 15 years, you had more and more people like, I hate SEO. They've ruined the internet. I can't find what I'm looking for. Google is a decrepit shopping mall, right? It's like users will eventually find out the truth, even if right now we're able to manipulate them and deceive them with certain
Mm-hmm.
tactics. So I believe in EEAT as much as I always have, because I think if you focus on that and you don't focus on deceiving your users, you're going to win long term. As the large language models and Google and everything get better and better at elevating authentic content. And the irony right now is like, we'll talk about this in a bit, I think, but like with Reddit and Quora and these discussion forums where you get really authentic, real human experience and expertise, they got so highlighted in search. And now
Mm-hmm.
everybody's going onto those platforms trying to spam them. So it's like, this has always been my philosophy. And of course, it takes longer and it's harder to do. But the more you can just like put out valuable content, put out original research, become a trusted name in the space, earn the right credentials, demonstrate all those things online, you're not going to get in trouble. You're only going to, gradually rise to the top, in my opinion.
So when you work with, agency side, when you're working with clients and you're trying to convince them to not do the cheap tricks and actually invest in this, like, do you run into opposition with people who are like, no, I want the traffic now. I'm not, I can't be bothered to invest. What do I do? Do you run into that a lot or no?
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
We get clients that just want to move quickly and they don't want to hear, about the tactics that take a really, really long time and they're very, very hard to
Mm-hmm.
do, right? They want to hear about what are the tricks we can do now. And I
Yeah.
understand that completely. I do have one interesting anecdote from a client that we worked with a few years ago where they got hit by an algorithm update. We had been advising them to not do certain things, but they doubled down on doing those things. They got hit really hard by an algorithm update.
What
And
a shocker.
we started to really encourage them to focus on EEAT because we knew that was going to help them solve the problem. It was a medical
Mm-hmm.
website. They decided at that moment, we're not moving quickly enough. We need to find a different solution. So they stopped working with us. The client emailed me a year later, apologizing and saying, we tried other things and it's not working. So we want to try this EEAT focused like rebrand essentially. And we worked together and it was one of our best success stories. It took a while, but you can see the site crashing and burning. They started to do things right for about a year with us. And within like 6 months or so, they grew right back to where they were before. It took a long time. It took like maybe 1 or 2 years to get back there, which is why I always advocate not getting in that situation in the first place, you know?
Yeah.
But that to me was a testament to like, sometimes clients just don't want to hear it and sometimes they're not the best fit for you. We honestly work with a lot of companies that have been penalized or have been demoted with algorithm updates. So they've already learned the hard way, unfortunately. But because I talk about this stuff all the time, because my team advocates for this stuff all the time, a lot of companies come to us understanding that you have to play the long game. And those are usually the best types of, partners for us.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, like talking to companies like recovering from penalization issues, like that is something that is very specialized and not every SEO knows how to do that. Like, for example, I'm going to send people to you. And I have sent people to you who have been in that situation because it is such a specialized skill. So that's a great success story. I just had an interesting question come in from Chris Richardson. Where is the line between training the LLM and what your company does and trying to trick it into favorable responses about your company project?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think right now that's a really murky line. I think a lot of people are doing things that I personally wouldn't advocate for just in terms of like how the user might perceive them. So I've talked about this a lot this year. I also know Will Reynolds has talked about this a lot this year, but this whole tactic of like writing a blog post about who's the best XYZ company in the space and then putting yourself number one. Everyone's doing it right now because yes, it works in large language models, but Will Reynolds just talked about this at MozCon. I've been talking about this as well. It's like, for the average customer to land on that and see that that's why it's being pulled into LLMs, or maybe they learn later, like, I thought they were the best, but it turns out that they're only the best because they're saying that they're the best. And that's really manipulative. I just wouldn't want that to happen. I personally wouldn't want that for my clients. So I think there's a way to do this authentically while also, showcasing the attributes and aspects and, accolades for your brand in a way that's like, yeah, I think there's new ways that we can update that information for AI search without being like mildly deceptive or manipulative or self-serving. But it's true, there's a fine line. I also think that what works right now won't work forever. I don't think that this approach of writing listicles with your own brand as number one is going to work the same way next year. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Google, for example, created some type of manual action for this specifically. I'm actually kind of betting on that because they've done that with all types of other manipulative tactics over the years.
Yeah, I mean, well, we'll see, I guess, 6 months from now, if that turns out or not. Actually, and when you mentioned Will, I actually remembered something he posted about on LinkedIn. I don't remember if you saw this or not, but for Seer, in their footer, they just had something like a brand statement, and then he switched to like what it is they actually do. And then immediately in ChatGPT, et cetera, it picked up on it and was like, oh, this is what Seer actually does. So there are ways to train the LLM to pick it up. And I thought the emphasis on the footer was really interesting, which is, an area SEOs have abused over the years. And apparently LLMs really like it. Don't put hidden text back in your footer though, please.
Yeah.
Let's not go back down that road again.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Will did is a perfect example of doing it right. Like if you want to use something like your website footer to add some statistic about your brand that you think is really impactful, that's a great way to do this. You know what I mean? It's not, like you said, it's not cloaking, it's not hiding information, it's actually presenting it to your users.
Yeah, for sure. And so why do you think SEO folks love a shortcut? Like, why are we so obsessed with shortcuts and one weird tricks?
I mean, it's the same with anything, right? It's the same with losing weight. It's the same with like making money, right? It's like we don't want to do the hard work. We want to just make it happen really fast. And the thing about SEO is that there always have been tactics that can work really quickly. Usually they don't work for very long, but there are those tactics. There always have been those tactics. There's a spectrum of how people approach SEO. And right now with GEO or AEO or whatever we're calling it, that's like the rebirth. We're in a new era of being able to manipulate LLMs. I think they're relatively easy to manipulate. With each model update, it becomes a little bit harder. But compared to Google, right? I mean, Google's been so aggressive the last few years with cracking down on spam, including companies that didn't even know they were spamming. They thought they were just doing SEO and they were considered spam by Google. That's not the case with ChatGPT, right? I think ChatGPT cites a lot of like purely AI generated content. It cites sites that don't have a lot of traction on Google. So there is kind of this new like renaissance of spam and manipulative tactics that are working right now. I just don't believe that it's in the best interest of the AI companies to continue to allow those to inform their answers over time. So I don't think it's going to work forever.
Yeah, and I mean, I wonder too, sometimes there's like this naivety when it comes to new technology tools that are introduced. And they're like, oh, people will use this in a good way. And then it turns out that no, they don't. And they're like, oh my goodness, I couldn't see this coming, that people would abuse our systems. And I feel like the AI tools are in that same sort of space right now. Is just, oh no, someone is spamming my tool. How could did you not see that coming? I'm going to learn nothing from Google. It's, it's amazing.
I think it's hard to do. And like Google didn't have a web spam team in the beginning. Google had to introduce a whole web spam team and Matt Cutts and all these people to talk about like, okay, a lot of people are manipulating our search results, so we need to do something about it. And I don't remember the exact statistic, but it was like a couple of years back, maybe like 2019 or 2020. Google said like 60% of what they crawl is spam. Every day. So like
I'm
that's
sure it's higher now.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of their resources that they have to dedicate to fighting spam. So like most of the
just
content
wasted money.
Yeah. Most of the content they're crawling doesn't even make it into the search results.
Yeah, and also like setting the planet on fire because we're
also that
generating spam. Please don't.
Also that mild detail. Yeah.
I mean, people who make spam probably aren't listening to this webinar right now, but please don't. All right. Good question from Marjo. So are you saying, as y'all are saying culturally, we're trained to want instant gratification. So any particular tips for measuring, monitoring the ROI on sticking with the long game? Yeah. What are the things that you look at first to indicate that like we are moving in the right direction as opposed to saying, oh, just wait, it'll happen?
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously you want to see like the main KPIs that we focus on are at least trending in the right direction. This is not to say that you can't see success in the short term. It's just not going to be the rapid success that you might see with some more manipulative tactics. But so yeah, you want to, whatever metrics you're focused on, whether it's right now, I've been talking a lot about like branded impressions, search demand for your brand and your products. Obviously we have new metrics with large language model tracking tools. So like share of search, visibility within AI search and search engines, all those things, you want to see them trending in the right direction. But I would say, if you're creating content, you can look at other signals around engagement, because at the end of the day, engagement is how a lot of these tools measure what should stick around and what shouldn't. So, there's tools like BuzzSumo we love using that look at like social media engagement. Obviously you can use Google Analytics. I'm sure Dana can talk all about this, but like, how do you measure the engagement and the reception of your content? Because if those things are trending in the right direction, we can assume we're going to be rewarded for that over time.
I'm actually publishing a post this afternoon that's going to be on my LinkedIn tomorrow about using engagement rate to determine traffic quality. Love it. Yeah, I think that's for sure that indicates a mismatch if you have a low engagement rate on a landing page and it's something you're working on. I think branded impressions are huge. What tools do you use when you're monitoring things like LLM mentions? What's your favorite tools for that?
Yeah, there's obviously like 500 of them now, so I try not to be too biased because I haven't tried all of them. Yes. Our team is using Profound. We've partnered with Profound since like the spring, and we're using that for our AEO audits and consulting. I love it. I think it's great. I think it's one of the better tools that I've demoed as far as the tools that I'm using. Peak AI is another one that we've demoed that is excellent as well. It's just different kind of like price points. And then there's a lot of new ones. Ahrefs has a great new brand radar. SEMrush has AIO. SimilarWeb has some really great tools as well. I've been using those as well. But, I don't want to, I just haven't tried all of them. I think there's a ton that are out there. So if I don't mention them, it's just because I'm not actively using them. You can only use so many tools. But they all kind of effectively do the same thing. So I think it'll be interesting over the next year to see which players remain, if there's any consolidations with other tools or whatever. But I think you should at least be using something. There's a lot of people that are pushing back against LLM tracking tools for good reasons. I understand those reasons. I understand the challenges these tools are faced with as far as getting good data. But I think by not having any data, you're kind of at a disadvantage. I think it's helpful to at least see what the competitive landscape looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we use SE ranking for our tool, and they also have a LLM tool. Another tool I've actually used, and I was introduced to this by Rand Fishkin, is Gumshoe. I don't know if you've used that one or not, but it has persona-based
That's cool.
tracking, which is really interesting. Yeah, I liked it quite a lot for sure.
Yeah, that's important, the persona base, just because these tools are so personalized.
Yeah, absolutely. Adrian had a good comment about when I get an organic link from a pub that is legit, I know I'm making legit content. Absolutely. Actually, one of our best links on the Kickpoint website, we have a blog post about how to take a good headshot, which is like guidance we would give clients on to take their own headshots for us. And we got linked to from BART, which is the regional transport system in San Francisco. And so
Nice.
we get tons of traffic from this random link. But yeah, clearly it's helpful content because BART thought it was useful. So it's,
Amazing. Super
yeah,
cool.
yeah. Jason Dodge asks, are there any industries or query types where you're seeing actual traffic gains from individuals coming in from AI platforms? And are you seeing this as valuable content?
Hmm. I mean, traffic is a tricky one, right? Because these tools don't send so much traffic as a whole. I think like most of our clients that we actually follow your articles, Dana, and create
Yep,
custom
good
segments
channel.
in GA to understand where if all this traffic, where all this AI traffic is coming from and how much traffic we're getting. And I think it's about like 1 to 2% of overall
Yeah.
traffic right now on average. But I think, the more upper funnel informational type content has obviously been cut into for most of our clients, whether it's through AI overviews or people just asking those questions in ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever. Like, obviously, we're seeing lower traffic for those. I think more like consideration or almost like conversion oriented questions, we're seeing some good traffic from LLMs, and also just like brand mentions and brand recommendations. And then also like articles that we publish or that our clients publish that are very like data driven. So if we have a
Yep.
unique data set or perspective around certain data, that'll often get cited in AI search, because like as the AI answers are trying to like pull in data to answer people's questions, they often pull in like a couple different viewpoints or different original data. And so we've found like if you have your own original content, that tends to be cited pretty heavily as well.
Yeah, that's a great point about original content for sure. And I do find, based on our own research, because we actually on Analytics Playbook, I would say about 5% of our traffic now is from AI searches, and I find it is more bottom of funnel, like specific.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I'm ready to tell me the training courses, or I need a blog post that does this very specific thing, not just like I need general information about GA4. It is very specific bottom of funnel. I do find
For
that
sure.
people who come from AI are almost pre-vetted in a way from AI. So it's like, a friend told you, your good friend Claude or
Mhm.
ChatGPT told you to go to this site. And so now you're more, engaged with it. I find engagement rates, for example, from AI tools are higher than they
Yeah.
are from, say, even general organic search. And same thing too with, I don't know if you do any tracking. There's also a post I have on how to track people coming to your site from AI overviews. Not
Mm.
totally foolproof, but it does catch a lot of people. I also find that those people are more engaged as well because they are taken to the right part of the post that
Yeah.
talks about their specific issue. So they're more likely to stay around.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think if you think about it, like at least with the way that I use LLMs and I've seen other people use LLMs, like
Mm-hmm.
most of the conversation is happening within the LLM. That's just how search is changing. But if you get to the point where you still need additional context or insights, like you're going to click on the article. So to your point, like those are very, very
Yeah.
qualified users at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things I would recommend too, if you are tracking this, make sure to set up a remarketing audience of people who have visited. And I do have a post on my website about this too, about different audiences. So 4 audiences that I always set up now are people who with first touch AI, return touch AI, any touch AI, and zero touch AI. And those are really good remarketing audiences as well for your paid team. So they can see, how people engage with AI in part of the sales cycle. And I'm finding that like not, I would say the return touch AI, not first touch AI, is actually a really fantastic engaged audience that you could use in remarketing, for example, because they've clearly found you somehow. And then AI was like, no, go back to this site. Now they're
Mm,
really interested in you.
brilliant.
Question from Jesse Math. Should CMOs invest in these AEO analytics tools today like Profound? What decisions are they driving, or should they prioritize other imperatives first? I mean, I think the answer is yes, they should get these
Yeah,
tools, but
it's a tricky one. I'm hearing a lot of like what I consider to be very reasonable, like pushback or criticism of this whole category of tools, for good reason. So, for example, um, we don't have a good view into how personalized the answers can be. Like if a user is paying for a ChatGPT subscription, like they're extremely personalized at this point. I'll ask a question, it'll say, oh, you're Lily Ray, you're VP of, SEO at AMSIV, da 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 da. Like they're not going to show that, like the profounds of the world. They're not going to be able to provide that level of personalization and granularity. This doesn't work that way. So I think you mentioned before, like with Gumshoe, if they're doing personalization, I think that's something that's helpful to consider. But these tools are meant to be used directionally. And I also think that you won't have any insight if you're not using them. You're not going to get that insight from Search Console. You're not going to get it from Google Analytics. Like this is a whole net new category of tooling that we need to at least understand directionally what's happening. So in that sense, I think it's really important for teams to have at least something. But the thing that I will caveat is it's not a magic bullet. It doesn't do the work for you. And as much as these tools are trying to introduce new features that assist you with the work, I'd be really careful with those, just because that's what we've seen in the past when tools start to create like automations that everyone gets on board and does the exact same thing. Again, it's very easy for search engines to say, we don't like automated approaches to creating content, Yeah. So if you are using like the recommendation features from these tools, just use your own best judgment, incorporate real human, experts to kind of interpret the data. So I just want to be clear, like these tools don't do everything for you. You still need a team to interpret the data.
Yeah, absolutely. And so while we're talking about tools, let me ask you, like, what AI tools beyond Profound does your team use? Like, obviously, I assume you're using ChatGPT, et cetera. So what does your team consider to be, responsible AI tool use?
Yeah, definitely. I actually pinged my team this morning about this because all of us are building all kinds of different things all the time now with AI. So some of the things my team told me and some of the things I'm using as well, I think we use it all the time for like generating regex for things like Search Console.
Yeah, no. Regex is the worst. Like this is, if LLMs did nothing else, I would be grateful.
Yeah. And then, generating or like editing structured data and code, generating code for Python or data analysis. I use it a lot for assistance with Power BI because I use Power BI for data analysis and visualization. So it's like, if I get stuck somewhere, you can just take a screenshot and like put it into, we use ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini. We use a lot of them. We've built a technical auditor for Google Discover. We've built a Google Discover headline generator, a daily SEO news feed, image file size versus rendered size Chrome plugin, a bulk YouTube site embed to video schema generator, custom GPT for Merchant Center audits, like so many specific use cases of what our team is working on. We've just made those processes more efficient with AI. But you mentioned like, safe and responsible uses for AI. Where we draw the line is generating purely AI generated content for clients and publishing that content without human oversight. We've just seen too many times over the years, even though, yes, it's harder to detect AI content feels more natural than automated content has in the past. We've just seen it time and time again, where when you're overly reliant on automated content, whether it's AI content or other types of automation, you kind of lose that human element. So if you are going to be using AI automations to create content, I know companies like AirOps, they're very careful about incorporating real human experience and expertise and original data and everything. As long as you're doing it that way, you should be okay. But we certainly aren't like, let's use ChatGPT to generate 30 blog posts for our clients. Like we would never do that.
Yeah, and never review it. Like what I like using Claude for, and I'm a Claude person, is generating like headlines. So I'll upload a bunch of stuff for a post and say, here's the Google Search Console query data for this particular post. Out of this stuff, because there's often gems in there of things that like the post is ranking for that you don't directly address. But if you are ranking for that, then it can indicate that there's a gap for that content out there in the marketplace and say, like, what are the topics I could riff off of from this particular post? And that's a really interesting use of like creating those, just like an outline that I can get started with. Writing. And because also I have a really suspicious relationship with grammar, I always get Claude to double check my stuff before I pass it on to our internal review.
I love
Amy
that.
thanks me for that so that she doesn't have to deal with my weird grammar all the time.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's such a great point. I think like people always ask about how we're using AI, and like, I don't know about you, but I'm using AI all day, every day for everything at this point. Like,
I have it open in my other window all the time.
Yeah, like it's, I mean, obviously within reason, like there's certain things I know it just can't do very well. So I'm not going to ask those types of questions, but for like what you're describing, like editing, inspiration, creativity, copy pasting an article and saying, what have I missed here? What else could I be talking about? Like just like enhancing the work you're already doing.
Yeah.
I think it's excellent.
Yeah, and often too, I'll use it for like titles and descriptions for talks and say like, does this is where I want the audience to go? Does this title and description actually, describe where I want them to go, or do I need to add in more details?
For sure.
And that help. And does it match like the other talks that are at this conference as well? Because each conference has their own little style of how they
Love
like
that.
to write things. Yeah, yeah.
For sure.
Rebecca has a good question. So, what do you guys think about valuing the new LLM metrics? We used to think of traffic as a bit of a vanity metric. Yep, for sure. And suddenly things have changed. So now you try to map it to micro, macro conversions. But the time between LLM metrics and conversions seems more tenuous. What's your take? So this is a great question because I think that this is where suddenly for years we were like, no, traffic, just a vanity metric. And now all of a sudden we're like, actually, it seems kind of important. So I don't know, Lily, what when you're putting together reporting for clients, like where does traffic fit into that?
Yeah, that's honestly probably the hardest conversation we're having with a lot of clients right now. Like it's almost like people, they understand AI overviews is happening. They understand that shifting search behaviors are happening, but they just don't want to accept it in their own data. It's like, but our
It's
traffic's
nice to happen to other people, but for me, I still want my
yeah,
traffic. Yeah.
exactly. I think at this point we work with a lot of news and publisher clients. So for them, it's very clear. You can see the impact of AI overviews this year in their search console. Like they understand it. But yeah, I think this whole thing is becoming very, very murky. And I'm sure you can speak to this, Dana, but like, even when you got visibility or you got mentioned or you got cited in an LLM, it doesn't necessarily translate into traffic.
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily translate into anything that you see in analytics. It could just be like brand recognition, right? And how do you measure that? And how do you measure if your brand is recommended in an LLM and then someone goes to search and Googles your homepage or Googles your brand name? How do you know that it came from an LLM? This is all becoming very, very murky.
I mean, attribution is essentially broken, and we've known it's been broken for years. And this is where a lot of, even though my entire livelihood depends on analytics, sorry, it's getting worse, not better. And I think this is where, being able to draw those lines is really difficult. So that's why I think this was 2 years ago now at MozCon, I talked about the idea of efficiency, which is the number of impressions of your whatever it is on ads, on search, on, wherever people see your stuff, divided by the number of whatever your final metric is. Maybe that's, purchases in store or conversions on your site or whatever it might be. But then what happened was that then Google broke impressions in Google Search Console. And all of a sudden it turns out that like half the impressions we saw in Google Search Console were actually just rank trackers. So if you are thinking about going back in time and adjusting efficiency, something that I've been trying is actually going back to before the great, impression apocalypse, and then just dividing that impressions by half and being like, okay, I think about half of this is real people, the other half is not. So, let's take a look at that. And it actually makes it look better in terms of the impression to conversion rate. It's shocking the volume of impressions that showed up in Google Search Console from rank tracking tools.
Totally.
Like, I knew it was a problem, but it's amazing the scope of the problem for sure.
Yeah. And now we have annotations too. So I've been going through my clients and Search Console and just adding a label where that happened, because I think not everybody knows the context of what happened there. So these annotations in Search Console, everybody that has access can see it. So I think it's nice to go in there and say, Google changed something here,
Yeah, and I think annotations came out, yesterday?
Yesterday,
day before?
yeah.
Just, no announcement, just like, hey, surprise. I mean, like a little announcement of no warning. This is how Google does things.
Of course.
But there is no API for the annotations in Google Search Console yet, just FYI. So you do have to manually do this, which sucks. So please API it, Google. Thank you. Hopefully someone from Google's watching this. All right. So for solopreneurs with limited budgets, is there a more manual way to do what tools like Profound do?
Well, funny enough, it's such a competitive landscape that there's actually free tools now. God, I need to remember the name of that company. 1 second. Free LLM tool. It starts with an A. I'll find it.
I've used Noatoa. That's a free tool up to a certain point.
Noatoa. I have to find it, but there was it's called like Adaptive or something. It was some. Yeah, some software company that
Adaptive is it. Yeah,
I think it's Adaptive. They just launched a new one. Peak is a more affordable version, definitely for like freelancers. I think it's within a freelancer budget. Profound launched a $99 a month option. And a lot of these tools have started to offer lower tiers, because I think a lot of people are in that boat where they just can't afford, the bigger tools. So there's free ones.
Well,
There's free ones out
and
there already.
Geraldine is actually Canadian. She's actually here on Vancouver Island with me, I think. Actually, she's up
Amazing.
island. And so I just checked, 99 American dollars is 140 Canadian dollars. So, it's all
Still a
right. It
lot.
just, it's still,
Still a lot.
still
Look for the free
expensive.
ones. I mean, they're not going
Yeah.
to be as good, obviously, but there's at least something that you can work with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so there was also a question that just popped in too about what are some ways you use AI to help parse GA4 data. So I don't know if you have, but I just wanted to say I actually have a course out on LinkedIn Learning that just came out a couple months ago on parsing a GA4 data using AI. So if you go on to LinkedIn Learning, search for me, it'll come up as one of the courses. Or if you have a library card, most libraries around the world have free access to LinkedIn Learning. So you can access their whole catalog for free through your library card. Just FYI, so you don't have to pay for LinkedIn Premium. Sorry, LinkedIn, but
It's really
it's
good.
they license the libraries use it. But have you used AI to help parse GA4 data?
Not specifically, I don't think, but I've definitely used AI to help me navigate GA4.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's fair.
I need to do this specific thing in GA4. How do I get there? That's
Yep.
been super helpful with not just GA4, but every tool.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one thing that I like to do a lot is pull in GA data and Search Console data and try to like cross-reference it a bit.
Yep.
And if I'm doing any type of like big data analysis there, I'll often use AI to help me run those analyses.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good use of it. I find that one of the things too, if you are asking LLMs for help with GA4, it does sometimes come up with universal analytics stuff. It doesn't,
Mm.
it still doesn't know GA4 sometimes. Even if you tell it specifically GA4, it does not know. And it is
Mm.
not necessarily up to date on new features in GA4. So something to keep in mind. And also, if you are asking it ever for help on Looker Studio, make sure to say, Google Looker Studio, not Looker, because it cannot tell the difference between Looker Studio and Looker, and it will, which is fair because the names are ridiculous. Google Data Studio was a great name; they should have kept it, but that's yeah. Just make sure to be specific because you will get weird answers
For sure.
sometimes coming through. Yeah. Oh, good. Joe says he does use his library card for LinkedIn Learning. Amazing. That's great. So let's talk. I just want to go back to what we were talking earlier about Reddit. Reddit, obviously, massive explosive growth in Google results for better or for worse. Like, as a Redditor, I use Reddit on the regular, especially for fantasy football. That's 'tis the season right now. You know, Reddit isn't exactly like the best representation of the internet or humanity as a whole. But do you think that this explosive growth that Reddit's seen is sustainable? Do you think Reddit will eventually drop out of Google's favor now that the marketers are like, oh, let's spam Reddit?
Yeah, it's a really interesting quandary that I think Google and like OpenAI also has a partnership with Reddit. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's been interesting to watch. Google elevated Reddit over the last few years really aggressively, particularly in like late 2023, early 2024.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the biggest growth in the shortest amount of time we've ever seen in Google search visibility, sort of like search results visibility. Outside of Amazon came close. But we all know now Reddit's ranking everywhere. Also, Reddit's cited everywhere in LLMs. And if you think about why that happened, there's a number of reasons. Obviously, the companies partner with each other. There's that.
Mm-hmm.
But users like Reddit content. Google saw the signals for years that people kept adding Reddit to the end of their search, and people really engage with Reddit content. And I'm sure everyone has a story about how Reddit helped them solve some problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand why it's so elevated in these platforms. And most people that you talk to, like Redditors like yourself, or people that have been using it for a long time, can speak to like, I like it because I feel like I'm getting real information. I'm getting authentic conversations from real people, and marketers being marketers, because these tools are so visible now, or because Reddit is so visible in these tools, now we're going in there and trying to find opportunities to sell our products and market things and use AI to spam, subreddits that might be really visible in AI search or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And you're
Mm-hmm.
already starting to hear Redditors like, it's not the same as it was before.
Yep.
Moderators are not able to stay on top of a lot of this spam. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
subreddits that don't have heavy moderation where spamming is like winning, so it's like,
Yeah.
this is why we can't have nice things. I think either Reddit needs to get better at moderation, which I imagine is a
Mm-hmm.
huge task right now with AI content.
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah, like Google's going to need to figure something out, because they certainly didn't elevate Reddit this much just for Reddit to be full of spam.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Quora.
and it actually reminds me a little bit of, remember DMOZ back in ye
Yeah.
olden days of SEO. So, if for those of you who do not know, DMOZ was a directory site, and it was one of the original like directories on the web, and had all these like subsections. So, if you wanted to find a restaurant in Hamilton, you would go to the Hamilton subreddit and go to the and so subreddit section, and so you would have section editors, and those people were essentially gods for whatever showed up in that section. So if you were an SEO and you got to manage, say, the section for, you have a client who does plumbing in the city and you were managing that section, you could kick out all your clients' competitors and just have your client listed there. And it almost feels like that now with Reddit, and moderators have that same kind of power. And obviously, DMOZ eventually fell out of favor, but it took longer than it should have for that to happen.
Yeah. It's definitely like, it's a weird thing right now because it's like I can't sit here and pretend like it's not going to work for now, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
going on Reddit and promoting your site or whatever, it's probably going to work in many cases,
Yep.
but you have to think about the impact that it's having on Redditors, right? If they
Mm-hmm.
feel like, oh, this is ruining my platform, like the engagement signals are not going to be there anymore if people start to abandon Reddit. So
Yep.
just think long term. That's always my
Yeah.
advice.
And there's also a good subreddit to check out called Hail Corporate, because then you can see the obvious astroturfing that people have done to go in and be like, oh no, this is totally legitimate review from a real person. And then it's clearly not. So if you want to see examples of bad corporate promotion, go into Hail Corporate. That's a great
That's so
place to
funny.
start. Yeah. So actually, which makes me think about, a while ago, you talked about the idea of influencer marketing and SEO converging. And so, do we think that we have hit that now? You originally predicted this, I think it was like about 2 years ago. Have
Hmm.
we borne out that prediction that influencer and SEO is basically becoming one at this point?
I think that it hasn't necessarily completely become one yet. I think it's still on that trajectory where what I meant by that is like all the signs are there that at least Google is really trying to reward well known individual contributors. And
Mm-hmm.
what I mean by that is like it could be popular YouTube channels, it could be
Right.
popular TikTokers or people on Instagram. Like, first of all, Google opened up, indexing of Instagram content a couple of years ago, maybe last year, maybe even earlier this year. But we
Mm-hmm.
started to see the signs of them taking, these individual expert contributions and influencer contributions and really elevating that in search. They have different search features that they use for like perspectives and authors and things like this to showcase real people. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the direction that we're going is people like to follow people, above brand content. They like individual content. We're hearing
Yeah.
certain publications that are experimenting, like literally like news publishers experimenting with making their journalists into basically influencers, right? Like having their
Mm-hmm.
journalists do live broadcasting from TikTok or from Instagram where they talk about their original ideas or doing podcasts or whatever it is, because people like to hear from real people. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be increasingly true with AI search. This homogenous branded content that looks and feels like everybody else's content, I don't think is going to stand out as much as real people. And another thing to consider too is that when you have enough signals from around the internet that someone is really well trusted in their space, LLMs are going to be a lot more likely to recommend those people or content by those people. So I think that it's the opposite of boring AI content, is
Yeah.
like real original content from humans.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
like Rand Fishkin's been talking about this a lot as well, but like, things have changed in the marketing world because a few years back it was about owning all your own content, your own assets, publishing in your own ecosystem that you have control over.
Yep.
Now it's really shifted to like these platforms are obviously demoting content that have links to your own site or to your own,
Mm-hmm.
assets, and they're increasing the visibility of content that stays within their own platform. So like
Yep.
LinkedIn is a perfect example of this.
Mm-hmm.
I get 100 times more reach on LinkedIn than I get on anywhere else, even including X, where I
Mm-hmm.
have way more followers. On
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn, it's like you can post something that is just original ideas, usually without a link to another site, and
Mm-hmm.
get like 50,000 impressions or 100,000
Yep.
impressions for free.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like that's also kind of another way where I think these individual experts and influencers that own their own social profiles and are contributing across social, it's actually really being rewarded in SEO. A lot of that stuff gets cited really heavily and ranks
Yep.
really, really well.
Yep. Yeah, and it's I actually encountered this when I was I couldn't remember how long an annotation could be. and I was making something in a Google Sheet. So I just Googled like GA4 annotation limits and my own post came up,
Hmm.
but it wasn't my post on my website. What came up was my LinkedIn post about my
Yep.
post on my website and my YouTube video, which is embedded in the post in my website, not the
Yeah.
actual website. It's like, you know what? It's great. I own this SERP for this particular term, and it's, you know, it's all my stuff, but it's all these different platforms. I don't care. Syndicate it out. You know, this is somewhere Ross Simmons is like, someone talked about syndication. I'm really happy about it. But yeah,
Yeah.
if you haven't followed Ross, like he talks a lot about content repurposing, and that is what Google wants you to see. Take your stuff, post it
Yeah.
elsewhere. Yep.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, if you publish an original piece of content, it's relatively easy, especially with AI now, to say, okay, I made a long form video. I want to
Mm-hmm.
use, there's tools like Opus that are AI
Yep.
tools that split up the video into reels for Instagram and TikTok and YouTube
Mm-hmm.
shorts.
Yep.
And then you can, I mean, it's easier, again, easier now than it ever has been to say, here's an article that I wrote, help me make it into a presentation.
Yep.
Publish that presentation. Number one, present it to people. You know, you can make a presentation online or you can speak at a conference, then you can upload
Mm-hmm.
that deck to SlideShare or whatever, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like taking the same information that you've worked so hard on and putting it on all the different platforms. Like every day I post on X a million times. I usually copy paste my tweets. I should probably automate this somehow, but I also put them on Blue Sky. I
Yep.
post on Threads. I post on LinkedIn. I post on Instagram. It's like, yeah, it's a lot of work, but believe
Mm-hmm.
me, it pays off. You get a
Oh,
lot more eyeballs
absolutely.
that way.
100%. Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, if you use something like Buffer, you know, it makes it a little bit easier, but there's also limitations on that too. So I do end up often posting natively as opposed to automating that part of the process. But
For sure.
yeah, that's the trade off. So I feel like now is a really weird time to be getting into SEO. If you are just starting in this field, kind of rough. What, if you are a new SEO getting into this field, what do you think that they should be focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, I actually talked to someone about this yesterday, but I think like, you know, speaking from the perspective of like an agency where we've obviously hired a lot of people and done a lot of interviews over the years, one thing that's always stood out to us is people that are willing to get their hands dirty and try things on their own. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not even necessarily the person with the best university degree, you know,
Yep.
it's the person that is like, I'm really, really passionate about SEO or AI search. And I built my own website. You know, I built a website for my mom's floral business, you know, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is. And this is what I learned from the experience. We had people
Mm-hmm.
that came to us from completely different industries with work
Mm-hmm.
experience, but they started learning SEO on the side and they built their own tools and they built their own website. And that was enough for us to be like, we like what
Mm-hmm.
they're doing, you know, because they've learned things on their own. So I think experimentation, using AI tools is absolutely right now. Everybody wants to see that. You know, we want to
Mm-hmm.
see how are you taking a process and automating it or building a tool to help you in your workflow. It's easier than ever.
Yep.
But for me, it always really stands out when somebody has done the hard work of learning, you know, Google and Bing's policies and
Mm-hmm.
documentation.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you can correctly describe what does crawling mean, what does
Mm-hmm.
indexing mean, what's the difference between crawling and indexing, like depending on what level of SEO you're at, there's just like
Yep.
certain fundamental concepts that we really need to see that you understand.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously a lot of them we can train on the job, but like
Mm-hmm.
the more that you're prepared with, like, you know, if you say you know SEO, we're going to ask you about SEO, and
Mm-hmm.
we expect to hear that you've done your research from trustworthy places. So Google Search Central has all the documentation that you really need to learn SEO fundamentals, as well as I always
Yep.
recommend Moz Beginner Guide as well.
Yep, that's a great guide too. Yeah. This is my obligatory mention as well that I have a Bachelor of Science in Geography. So you do not need to have a relevant degree. Well, Lily, what did you go to school for?
Politics and Spanish.
Yeah, see, there you go. You use
Yeah.
that every day. I mean, I guess you probably do use the politics a little bit.
I use Spanish a good amount, but not for work as
Yeah.
much. I'm actually
Yeah.
presenting in Argentina in a couple months in Spanish, so that'll be fun, but
Yeah,
not
that's
so much.
great.
Yeah.
I really respect people who can present in a different language other than their primary language because it's not something I've ever been able to do. I mean, technically in Canada you learn French, but like my French is very bad.
Well, now you can
Oh,
use AI to help you. It's much
yeah,
easier.
it's not going to get the intricacies. Here's a great example of AI not getting it. Quebec French, very different from France French, and
For
AI
sure.
cannot tell the difference. So,
Wow. Yeah.
Adrian just posted this. What have you put on the internet lately? That's a great interview question. So,
Yeah.
if you're applying for a job, make sure you have a good answer to this question. I love this one.
I love that. I think that's great.
Smart question. Okay. Oh, and Adrian has a degree in environmental science. Yep, that's what
Amazing.
happens. Yep.
So
All
funny.
right, so let's get to our last question. I'm going to ask you. This is purely for my interest. What does the industry, SEO industry, have completely wrong when it comes to AI and search? What do you think that the prevailing industry belief is? What belief is out there that is totally wrong when it comes to search?
Yeah, it's hard with like prevailing belief because, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many people in the industry with
Oh
so many
yes.
different perspectives. I would say right now, this year, and I've kind of already hinted at this a lot, but I think one way that we're, I guess, missing the forest for the trees is like that the way that things are now are necessarily going to be the way that they are 6 months from now. I think there's
Mm-hmm.
so many variables that could change things. Number one, there's all this talk about AI being a bubble, which is a bit
Mm-hmm.
scary, right? If it ends up being a bubble, what does it look like if the
Yeah.
bubble bursts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Number two, like, Google has said a number of times that AI mode is the future. And I do think that we will see a version of search that looks much more like AI mode in the coming years. But we also need to remember how Google makes money. We need to
Mm-hmm.
remember that Google needs to make AI mode profitable. So it's like, I think we have these, like, especially this year, just a ton of hype about how everything's dramatically changing. And I do think it absolutely is in many ways. But I think a lot of the fundamental ways that we were doing SEO for the past few years, assuming that you were, let's say, integrating digital PR teams and social media teams and thinking about brand reputation and EEAT and writing great content for users, like all that stuff is really going to power your visibility in AI search as well. So as much as things have changed with regard to like how users are interfacing with these tools, like you said before, it's kind of like a layer on top of search. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that, I think first of all, SEO teams are the best prepared to work on these projects, these challenges. I
Yep.
also think that a lot of, like, I think many teams, let's say, that are doing things kind of the same way they always have been, are probably also going to see success in AI search. Like, I don't know that it's necessarily like everything that we're doing has to dramatically change. I've seen lots of examples where people are just producing really great original content and it's being cited heavily in AI search platforms as well. So there's a lot of hype. I would just be careful to like throw out everything you're doing and restart from scratch.
Yes. Yeah, I think the fundamentals are still there for sure. And actually, we have a graphic that Emma, our designer, made, which is the "I can't believe it's not butter" product, but it's "I can't believe it's just SEO" because that's really that it's still just SEO.
Yeah,
It's still just
like it or
SEO.
not,
Everybody, yeah, it's still just SEO.
we'll just SEO.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you, everyone, for your fantastic comments. And I just want to say at the end here, this is our last webinar of 2025. So, Lily, thank you so much for rounding out the year with me. I
Thanks
cannot
for having
believe
me.
it is almost the end of 2025. It's horrifying. Our first webinar 2026 is going to be in January. I have not announced the guest yet, but it'll be a good one, as always. So keep an eye on the Analytics Playbook LinkedIn page for that announcement and watch your email for a special discount analytics courses, plus the replay of this webinar. And if you don't see that email or you didn't register, message me on LinkedIn. I can help you out. Thank you again, Lily, for joining me today. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today. And have a great rest of your year. Americans, have a good Thanksgiving next week. And we'll see you in 2026. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having me.